The Boston Celtics owned the first overall pick in the 2017 NBA draft, but they ultimately agreed to switch picks with the Philadelphia 76ers, and as a result, Boston moved down and settled for the third overall pick, and with that, they ended up selecting Jason Tatum, who would then become their future superstar, while also acquiring a future 2019 first-round pick in the process. Similarly, the Atlanta Hawks owned the third pick in the 2018 NBA draft, but they ultimately traded down to the fifth spot as they sent Luka Doncic to the Dallas Mavericks, and in exchange, they landed their own future star in Trae Young, plus a future first-round pick which eventually became Cam Reddish. Well, these are exactly the kinds of trades which show us that teams who own higher picks could actually benefit from trading down depending on the situation. But this seems unlikely to happen in the 2021 NBA draft, which is projected to be one of the most top-heavy drafts in recent memory, cause the common belief is that the Detroit Pistons, who own the top overall pick, will eventually select the consensus best player, Cade Cunningham. Well, it could just all be smoke screens for all we know, but second-year GM Troy Weaver has openly stated that Cunningham definitely isn't a lock as the first pick at this point. But yeah, if I'm someone who's gonna play the odds right, there's definitely no chance I'm betting against Detroit drafting Cunningham. I mean, Cade going to Detroit just makes too much sense, but still, it's been known that at least 4 teams, the Rockets, the Cavs, the Thunder, and the Pelicans have been inquiring about trading up for that number 1 overall pick. While in an ideal world, Detroit would stay put and draft at number 1 depending on who they actually prefer. And for the record, I think that will most likely happen since having the top pick in a stacked draft is definitely the best advantage that any rebuilding team could have. But still, a smart GM like Troy Weaver will definitely take calls and listen to what those other teams have to offer. And I'm not saying that Detroit would pull the trigger on any trade, but believe it or not, I think there are actually a few deals involving a couple of those teams reportedly in talks with them, which would totally make sense for the Pistons. So what's good guys, it's Rero Balls here, and today we'll break down all those possible trade scenarios in this video. So let's get to it. Well, at this point, if I were the Pistons, I'd definitely take Cade Cunningham. He's a low-risk, high-reward guy who'd help put Detroit back into prime time as soon as possible. But the thing is, we're not Troy Weaver, and we aren't exactly familiar with how this guy's train of thought would work coming into draft night. But what's for sure is that this guy's done his homework. He's watched all those top prospects all year, and another thing is, Weaver is just the kind of guy who'd less likely subscribe to group thinking. This guy isn't afraid to make bold moves. He picked Killian Hayes in last year's draft over a borderline consensus top 5 pick in Tyrese Halliburton. He signed Jerami Grant to a multi-year deal in free agency when a lot of people thought that it didn't make a lot of sense, and this guy pushed for the OKC Thunder to draft Russell Westbrook 4th overall in 2008, despite Westbrook not being a consensus top 5 prospect at that time. So I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Detroit goes into an unexpected direction come draft night. But just to put some context into this video, we'll assume that Detroit is fixated in either one of Cade Cunningham or Jalen Green, which makes a lot of sense. And because of that, we also have to assume that teams are aware that they would most likely have to offer an almost unreasonable package in order to acquire the top overall pick. And if that's the case, I think the Cavs and the Rockets would definitely have the best chance here, considering that they hold the advantage of having slightly higher picks compared to teams like OKC or New Orleans. But what exactly could a potential trade for the number 1 overall pick look like? Well, let's take a look. In my own mock trade, the Cleveland Cavaliers received the number 1 overall pick in the 2021 NBA draft, and in exchange, the Detroit Pistons received the 3rd overall pick, a 2023 and 2025 first rounder, and Isaac Okoro. But why exactly would the Cavs do this trade? Well, first of all, Cleveland has lacked the buzz since LeBron James left the franchise in 2018, and the team also haven't exactly hit the jackpot in the draft despite having some good chances in recent years. They also came fresh off another losing season with a 22-50 record, and despite them having a solid young core in place, there's a reason for them to totally cash in on a guy like Cade Cunningham. Well, Cunningham isn't LeBron James, but he'll come into the league with all the hype and the buzz that would certainly help a franchise which lacks definite star power. With Cunningham, the Cavs will finally be certain about who their main building block would be moving forward, and most definitely, he'll fit nicely either as a guard or as a wing, playing alongside Collin Sexton, Darius Garland, and Jarrett Allen. And I mean, it could actually be true that the team isn't 100% sold on the idea of having a Sexton and Garland backcourt tandem for the future. And considering that the Cavs have to pay Collin Sexton pretty soon, they might actually choose to trade him or let him go, and if that's the case, Cade Cunningham would definitely be a solid replacement to go along with Garland while also offering a higher upside as a player who also comes at a much cheaper price because of his rookie deal. But on the other end, would the Detroit Pistons actually take this trade? Well, I think this deal gets done if Troy Weaver is sold on the idea that there isn't that much of a disparity in talent among Cunningham, Jalen Green, or Evan Mobley, meaning this deal becomes a no-brainer if it's fine getting whoever is left out of those three at the third spot. While in addition, the Pistons also get 2 future first-rounders from this deal, which would seem like an overpay for the Cavs considering that they're only moving up 2 spots. But I mean, this year's draft is seen as a stockpile of supposedly generational talents, so you definitely have to expect that acquiring the top pick would come at a high price. And lastly, the Pistons also receive a young high-level defender with offensive potential in Isaac Okoro in this trade. Okoro basically serves as sort of an equalizer in case the Pistons don't end up with who they exactly want at the third spot. Well, normally, I think you would expect Detroit to demand for a more proven player like Collin Sexton, but I also doubt Troy Weaver would be willing to pay him an extension soon. So yeah, if this trade gets done, the Cavs get their much-needed young player with superstar potential, and the Pistons get a lot without giving up that much. So this is something that Detroit would definitely do. But if this Cavs trade is possible, I think there's an even higher probability that Detroit says yes to a deal with the Rockets solely based on draft positioning. And in my potential mock trade, Houston receives the first overall pick in the 2021 draft plus Corey Joseph, who serves as sort of a small salary dump. And in return, the Pistons receive the second overall pick and the 23rd overall pick in the 2021 draft, a 2022 first round pick plus Jae'Sean Tate. And well, why would the Rockets do this? Well, yeah, this is also sort of an overpay considering that Houston is only moving up 1 spot, but Houston would definitely be willing to give up this much if they're really that high on a specific type of player, which in this case seems to be Cade Cunningham based on a lot of insider reports since the pre-draft process began. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Rockets already prefer Jalen Green at this point. Green is still a stud who just might even have a higher upside than Cunningham because of his insane hops and shot making ability. But the problem is Detroit might prefer Green as well. So ultimately, the Rockets would want to trade up for the top pick for one simple reason, and that is because Detroit could just easily grab the guy that they want ahead of them. Well, if the Pistons end up playing along with most draft projections and sticks with Cunningham, the Rockets lose their chance to build around a nasty Cade Cunningham and Kevin Porter Jr. tandem as the team's backcourt of the future. And I mean, Rockets owner Tillman Fertitta is a businessman. His business was hit by the pandemic, which means it's very likely that he's interested in a much quicker rebuild more than we think, and more people watching games means more money. And all signs point to Cade Cunningham as the more NBA-ready player, which means he would most likely be the key for the kind of rebuild that Houston wants. But on the other hand, why would Detroit actually agree to this deal? Well, this trade makes the most sense for Detroit, especially if they have decided that Cade Cunningham and Jalen Green are pretty much at par with one another. Since either way, they just move down 1 spot, they still get a player that they want, and they gain additional assets. Any smart GM wouldn't say no to that. I mean, they also get the Rockets' 23rd pick, which would definitely be of use to Troy Weaver, and they also get back their 2022 first rounder, which they gave up in the Saddiq Bey trade. Well, yeah, Detroit could have asked for Kevin Porter Jr. too, but I think that would kinda defeat the purpose of the trade for the Houston Rockets, which the Pistons understand. So instead, they ask for 25-year-old Jae'Sean Tate, who is a hardworking and physical forward who just made the 2020 All-Rookie First Team. Troy Weaver loves these kinds of players with natural physicality, and Tate will fit just fine in Detroit. So are the Rockets giving up a lot for the number 1 pick in this case? Yes, they definitely are, but they also have the resources to overpay Detroit if they badly want that number 1 pick. And again, Detroit gains a lot in this trade by giving up practically nothing. So I definitely think the Cavs and the Rockets have the best shot at trading up here for those reasons. But could a team drafting outside the top 5 actually pull off a realistic trade with Detroit? Well, sure, the OKC Thunder comes to mind here since they just have the most assets that any team could offer in a potential trade up. But as a Thunder fan, I think Sam Presti would most likely package something like the 6th overall pick and the 16th overall pick plus 2 future first rounders plus something like Darius Bazley and Isaiah Roby, something like that. But Detroit wouldn't do that trade for sure. The only way I see Detroit even considering a deal with OKC is by including Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in it. I mean, at a minimum, I think the Thunder would have to offer SGA the 6th overall pick and a 2022 first rounder to make it work. But the problem is, I'm not sure the Thunder would do that since SGA has already shown his true value as a potential all-star. Well, the only way I see OKC doing this is if they really want to hit the hard reset button and if they really want to lose for a much extended period of time for them to increase the probability of their future picks hitting the jackpot. But even if OKC welcomes the idea of including SGA in the deal, I also don't think Detroit would take it either. I mean, for sure, SGA is a beast. In 35 games last season, he averaged almost 24 points and 6 assists while shooting 42% from 3 with a 62% true shooting rate, and he also fits Detroit's timeline at 23 years of age. But even without taking SGA's star potential into account, just the thought that you probably have to sign him to a max extension this summer or the next just makes this deal almost unreasonable for the Pistons. I mean, why won't Detroit just select either Cade Cunningham or Jalen Green, who both probably have higher upsides than SGA, who also gives them more financial flexibility moving forward? And I mean, even with OKC including the 6th overall pick in the package, it's just hard to imagine Detroit settling for a guy like Scottie Barnes or Jonathan Kuminga, who just might belong to a tier below Cunningham, Green, and Mobley. But yeah, OKC's GM Sam Presti is practically a magician, and after all, he might be able to put something together which Detroit would find really irresistible. But ultimately, it all boils down to draft positioning and too much risk involved for Detroit, which I think would prevent OKC from being able to move up to number 1. But at the end of the day, Detroit will love to have that number 1 pick. They last owned the top overall selection 51 years ago, and whoever they might select, history tells us that out of 45 players who won MVP, 17 of those were number 1 overall picks, and only 10 were drafted within picks 2 to 5. So ultimately, Detroit is in a prime position to do something special here, but it would be ridiculous for GM Troy Weaver to refuse taking advantage of potential trade offers if it ultimately leads to a win-win situation for Detroit. So what are your thoughts on the Pistons draft position? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section below. And also, if you happen to enjoy this video, please make sure to hit that like button, and please do consider subscribing as well. Again, this is Rero Balls, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.